Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In the past few years, you've probably been hearing about the increase in home prices, increase in rents, and other things that have suddenly skyrocketed in price. And you probably were thinking, am I able to afford a house in the coming years with this new change? And if you're watching this video, this is something you really wanted to figure out. But before you do any of that, here are three things you must consider before you buy a house. The three aspects of property ownership. And before we get into it, this is Gary, a realtor based in Queens, New York, and here to educate you on what it means to buy, sell, and own a house in the great state of New York. Before we get started, like and subscribe if you want to stay up to date on the changing real estate market and how to prepare yourself if you want to buy your first home. So the three aspects we're going to be digging into today is the home purchase cost, the home ownership cost, and the cost of selling your house. So each of these are things that you will need to consider, especially when you're buying a house. And buying a house is not just an emotional decision. It's something that you will need to figure out financially if it's something that you can do, or you might need to wait a little bit longer to buy your first house. For this first aspect of the home purchase costs, there's some important things you will need to consider. One is, what is your down payment for your house? If you are taking a mortgage, a lot of times they will recommend 20% down, but depending on the program you will be utilizing, it could be lower, like 10% down. And there will be associated closing costs, which will be connected to this purchase. And this could range from 1.5% all the way to 6%, depending on where in New York you're buying it and what other things you add to your contract. So with everything, when you're buying a house, you will need to consider things like the cost of moving all the things around and moving all the things into your house and arranging it in a certain manner. And additionally, you will need to consider renovations, things you might need to do to fix up or improve your house to make it meet the standard of living that you would want. And lastly, a thing that a lot of people forget, the hidden cost, is the opportunity cost to really be purchasing the house relative to potentially investing into the stock market. These are some things that we can look deeper into in this example. So I can you see in this example, is it a house in Little Neck? A random example that if you potentially were to buy this house, let's say for $800,000, you would put a 20% down payment if you're going to get a mortgage for 80%, and that will be around $160,000. That will come with, let's say, a 3% closing cost, so that's $24,000. And you see this house, this will need a lot more work, so you will need around $50,000 worth of renovations to really reach a standard that you would want to live in for the next 5, 10, maybe 50 years. And since you will be moving from your apartment or from another house, it will be a few $1,000s just to move it if you hire a moving company. So with all these fees and really investment into your house, you would potentially be losing around $24,000 to the opportunity cost if you were to be investing this in the stock market. So these are only a few costs that you will need to consider when buying your house. And this is just numbers that you can move around, play around with, and really figure out what is a good range of things that you would honestly consider when buying a house and how much you will need to save when you're looking to begin your search. The second important aspect is the home ownership cost. And these are things that you must consider before you buy a house. From the required things like the mortgage cost that you do if you aim to have a mortgage when you're purchasing your home. And this is something that if you don't iron out details, it can come back to bite you in the future. The property taxes that you had to pay every year to the government to own this house on this lot. Some insurance, homeowners insurance, which costs a few $1,000s a year. and with some potential increasing depending on which area you're living in. And depending on an area within New York, there might be HOA fees or flood insurance payments that you might need to do every year. And these things will add up to a lot more than a lot of people think. And some other things that really come with home ownership is the aspect of pest control, things that might need to do depending on where you're living or your house condition. And then really improving the safety of things as the years go by. You might need to install more security systems or improve your system in general. And the cost to maintain your house. This is one thing that I see a lot of people when they buy a house, they don't properly maintain it. So it's that in the future, they weren't able to sell their house at a value that they like. And this could be around 1 to 2% of your house value, which is a recommended amount. So this is something that can also stack into your yearly bill with potentially, depending on how much utilities you use, it could be a few $100s a month on top of that. So let's dig into an example. So for our example from Little Neck House, you can see that if you were to take that 80% mortgage at a 6.8% interest rate, you can see that you'd be paying around $4,172 per month, which is about $50,000 a year. On top of that, around this area, property taxes are around 10K or up. So we just chose an example, $10,000 a year. And homeowners insurance for our current house value is around $3,000. But there's a theoretical increase of around 4% every year. So take that into consideration. And then there's a maintenance fees, things that you should invest into your house. Make sure your house is worth that same amount in the future. And that we'll say is around 2% of the house value. So in this case, around $16,000. And with the homeownership, you always have utility costs like gas, electric, and other things. So it's around $4,800 a year. So these are all things that doesn't consider anything, luxuries, amenities that you want to add on top of your house. And this already comes out to around $83,000 a year. So take that to consideration. If you were to invest this money into the stock market, you will get around $8,000 on top of it. So, as always, you should figure out your finances, because if you don't figure out this part correctly, there's a good chance you will lose ownership of your house due to foreclosure, or you might need to sell your house at a loss due to you not making sure you meet these payments. The last aspect is the home sale and potential profit for a real property. When you are selling your property, you might hire a professional stager to help you sell your property. And during this process, at the end, you will have closing costs, which can range of 6 to potentially 10% of your sale price. And you will have to pay transfer taxes and other fees to the government that comes associated with this type of transaction. And depending on how much profit you will make on this transaction, depending on the price of what you bought it at and the price you're selling it at, you will need to pay capital gains taxes on top of that too. There's a lot of other taxes and fees you might need to pay depending if you have mortgage and other things like that. So take this into consideration, and let's see an example. So for our Little Neck Queens house, let's say we are selling it after 5 years, and likely within this time frame, you are able to have the property be evaluated at a higher price of around $1.2 million. So you must be thinking, wow, I made $400,000. Well, let's dig into like the cost of potentially selling this house. So when you're selling this house, let's say you hire a professional stager to make your house look the best and be able to reason why it's priced at $1.2 million. So that's gonna be a few $1,000. And then there's other closing costs. Let's say it is around 6% of your sale price. So it's around $72,000. to basically make your capital gain zero. And during this process, if you have a credible CPA, they will help you make sure your actions will help you save and really keep most of that appreciation value. This video is a little bit pessimistic of the whole house buying process, but I honestly making this to make sure that you are making every decision that will work the best for you as a buyer, and you don't overstep what you are capable of doing financially. Everyone dreams of owning a house, and as a realtor, I really want you to buy one. But you need to make sure it's something you can afford financially. Every year, you see many houses that will be foreclosed on because they couldn't really pay the property taxes or the mortgage that they have, or they sold at a lower value than their mortgage, and they will need to pay that difference. And these things will set you back financially for years to come. And this is not a situation you want to put yourself into. Buying a house is not just an emotional investment, it is also a huge financial one. Make sure you maintain that dream house of yours such that in the future you will be able to profit like the example I showed you with that big appreciation bump. Nobody knows which areas will appreciate the most, and only you know what your financial situation is and what you want to be in a few years from now. So to end off this note, I really hope you liked this video and made you think about what you want to be potentially doing when you are going about this process of buying your first home. If you like the content I have been producing, comment down below if there is a topic that would interest you.